Mr. Martin Anthony, Assistant Chief Welfare Officer, related the Sexual Offences Act to the Rights of the Child Convention.
Well, the Sexual Offences Act is related somehow to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is an international human rights treaty which sets standards and conditions in regards to the exploitation of children, their holistic development, and their participation in the affairs of state. So Dominica ratified that convention in 1991, on the 13th of March 1991, and attempts have been made by Dominica to implement the provisions of the convention. In that regard, the Sexual Offences Act, number 1 of 1998, one may say, was passed in keeping with Dominica's obligation under the convention. The convention at Article 19 talks about the abuse of children, and Article 34 of the convention speaks to the sexual exploitation of children. And the Sexual Offences Act number 1 of 1998 was passed, and at the time of its passage, the Sexual Offences Act chapter 1036 was repealed. So Sexual Offences Act chapter 1036 was repealed and replaced in 1998 with the Sexual Offences Act number 1 of 1998. And the objective of that act is to protect, or the protection of persons from sexual offenses.
Mrs. Alex Boyd Knights further expounds on some of the main provisions of the Sexual Offences Act.
I'll just go through the different offenses that the Sexual Offences Act covers. Section 3 speaks of rape, that is sexual intercourse without consent. Then there is also unlawful sexual connection, which is referred to in Section 4, which is sexual contact without consent. I guess sexual contact differs from sexual intercourse in that sexual intercourse is genitalia, both genitalia involved, whereas sexual contact could be just one genitalia involved. Incest, that is, certain aspects of it is new, because Section 6 provides where not only sexual intercourse or sexual connection with close blood relatives are not permitted, but also where you have a stepfather and that sort of thing. Indecent assault, now that covers a multitude of sins, as it were. Section 13 defines indecent assault as battery or assault accompanied by words or circumstances indicating an indecent intention. So an example would be where a male or female over the age of 14 who says to another female, "I want to you," and touches that person's either organ or breast at the same time, that is an offense under the Act, and that is what would be considered indecent assault. Now, gross indecency. Gross indecency is defined under Section 14 as an act other than sexual intercourse involving the use of genital organs for the purpose of arousing or gratifying sexual desire. This is where the lesbian activity comes in. Now, bestiality under Section 17 is just defined as sex with an animal. Now, Section 18 is something that I don't know how easy or difficult it would be to prove, because it says the procuration, which is a term that is used in the Act, is defined as soliciting or conspiring with another person to induce minors and other persons to have sex. Now, the soliciting may be easy enough, but conspiring with other persons, okay? So the point is, the typical scenario that we would see, for example, is where a mother has a relationship with a man. She has a young daughter in the house. She's aware that the man is, looking at the daughter in a strange way. But she's willing to overlook it simply because he's the breadwinner, the meal provider. So she's sort of given a tacit consent there. Is she conspiring? Now, abduction. Abduction in Section 21 is defined as taking a person against their will to marry or have sex.
However, since one major objective of modern legislation is the protection of minorities and the elimination of discrimination, especially those arising from sexual preference, religion, and race, we decided to explore this issue as well. In other words, how do minorities on Dominica feel about the provisions and regulations of the Sexual Offences Act?
The Sexual Offences Act does not discriminate against the Kalinago people, from what I'm aware of. I think that the persons that would be of main concern or should be concerned in that regard would be the homosexuals or other persons that might have some form of contention with the law itself. It applies to them directly as individuals, but as a people, we do not see this doesn't pose any threat or any form of discrimination to us as a people. The only concern that I have is that there's always discrimination, a subtle discrimination that permeates within the whole Dominican society itself against the Kalinago people. In some instances you hear that is not so, and we are Dominicans, and it appears that it's a level playing field. But in truth and in fact, as far as we Kalinago people are concerned, this is not true, and we see subtle forms of discrimination taking place against us every day. Every day, men, young men, women, or particular women, comes up with such cases of discrimination against them.
Well, the Sexual Offences Act, as it exists at the moment, does not address HIV and AIDS. And from a professional standpoint, or from a national AIDS response standpoint, if anyone who is living with HIV is discriminated against, we usually look at the Constitution in terms of their rights. We look at people's rights and how we can address that. For me, the Sexual Offences Act, what needs to be done is to increase the age of consent. And if we increase the age of consent, we addressing the delaying sexual relations of young people, which is a good thing in terms of HIV and AIDS. Outside of that, we need to address issues like consenting adults. If consenting adults perform whatever form of sex they want to perform within the confines of their homes, should we label it as illegal per se? There's no need, or is it a right thing to do in terms of a human rights aspect? So those are the areas we need to look at, and need not per se look at the areas in terms of decriminalizing or criminalizing a particular act or behavior.
Another issue which surfaces in relations to the Sexual Offences Act is that of gender neutrality. Is the Act gender neutral?